Hi, Chloe James from RFI Global here. We're really excited to be bringing another episode of our podcast, and I'm pleased to welcome Shondell Varcianna, who's joining me from Georgia, Atlanta in the States, but a Canadian originally. We've got a really interesting conversation with you, Shondell, today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so you've got a really interesting background, and I guess the sort of overarching theme of this podcast episode that I do want people to really be across is the mortgages space, the housing space across North America. It's a really interesting time around the world in that space, just generally because of COVID and everything else, but also what you're doing now and the founder of a really amazing content business. Take me back to sort of the start of your career. I know a little bit of your background, but I think it'll be useful for our audience to hear about sort of who you are, what you did, and what you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. So I was born and raised in Toronto and moved here to Atlanta about 8 years ago. It'll be 8 years in September. And my career started in banking. So I started working at Bank of Montreal, which is that's the oldest bank in Canada. And I started working there as a teenager and just kind of worked my way up. I did a bunch of different jobs there, but my last job there, I was a mortgage loan originator. I also did underwriting. So I left Bank of Montreal after 8 years, and I started working at Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, and stayed there for another 8 years. And while I was at CMHC, I used to manage several accounts for them. So my job was to really go out and sell the insurance products because CMHC insures mortgages for banks. So my job was to educate banks on the different mortgage products that were available so that they could use those products to get more business. So that was really my job. And then I worked there for 8 years, and then I left there and started my own business while I was there, and then left CMHC and moved to Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I am now. And I'm still running the same company I had started when I was at CMHC.
Yeah, awesome. Tell me a little bit about that company.
Yeah, it's a writing company. So we write content for financial institutions. We write for not all financial institutions. We mainly stick with credit unions, mortgage companies, and banks. That's typically our clientele. And we write blog posts for them, monthly blog posts, as well as newsletters. And I've got a team of writers, editors, social media people, and one IT guy. And that pretty much makes up our team.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I definitely want to get onto your business and running a business. I think that's a really interesting conversation as well. But let's talk a little bit about the property market and the mortgages market across North America. And obviously, you've had quite a history in the space. How have things changed in recent years? I mean, so much has happened in the world. Just be really interested to hear your perspectives on the market at the moment in the market that you're in, or Canada as well is great to hear about, but just North America generally. I know that's a pretty broad space.
Yeah, we invest in real estate. We invest quite a bit in real estate as well. So we still own property in Canada. We own some property in Toronto as well as in Windsor, Ontario. And those are properties that we purchased before. Well, I purchased the one in Toronto probably about 20 years ago and still own that. And the ones in Windsor, we purchased that 2013 and 2014. And just the increase in value of those since we bought those is just, incredible. The industry, I mean, it's funny because in Ontario, even when I was working in the industry in Canada, they were always talking about, the prices were going to go down. They were always talking about a bubble, but that just never happened. Like, prices just keep appreciating, and they're appreciating even faster now, more there than they are here. They're appreciating quickly here too, but Ontario much faster than they are here, which is good because the equity in our properties are more, but it's just becoming unaffordable for the average person. So that's the unfortunate part about these huge increases, because wages aren't going up as quickly as cost of living is. So it does make it difficult for the average person to be able to afford a property. One of the reasons why we moved here was because it's more affordable. The quality of life is a little bit better than what I grew up seeing. So that was one of the reasons why we transitioned out of the Toronto market, was just because I've always loved Atlanta. It's more affordable. The weather's nicer. And it's there. Here is more. it's more supportive for the entrepreneur. So I like that because most of the companies here are small businesses versus Ontario, it's large corporations.
Yeah.
So those are some of the reasons why we moved. And it's much more affordable. I you know, laugh with my brother all the time because he lives in Toronto and he lives in a very expensive area in Toronto. And I
Mhm.
tell him all the time, if you sell your condo, you could buy a street here
Yeah,
in
right.
the area. And he laughs all the time. And I said, I'm serious, you can buy a street. Probably not in downtown Atlanta, but you can, if I take you, a couple hours outside of Atlanta, you can buy a street for
Yeah.
to sell your
Amazing.
condo.
Well, I mean, the accent might sort of betray this, but I'm obviously an Aussie. But I should
Yeah.
actually say to the listeners that I am talking to you from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. This is where I live, and yes, property prices are absolutely insane and softening at the moment, actually a little bit. And we're talking in June 2022 now. Softening from, I guess, a huge boom that we were seeing last year. But yeah, it's really interesting time in both markets. I want to touch a little bit now on the clients that you work with now, and we talk about content, and I'm thinking of people listening into the podcast about how to make really powerful content, particularly in this financial services space and in the mortgages space. We have plenty of clients that are obviously wanting to do that. How do you best advise your clients on the most effective content marketing, what to write about, how to write about it, where to distribute it? If you could shed a little bit of light on that, particularly for the financial services audience.
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I would say is you've got to know exactly who you're targeting. Are you targeting first-time home buyers? Are you targeting repeat buyers? Like even the home buying sector, you've got many different niches within that because you've got the first-time home buyers, you've got people who are buying a second home, you've got rental income, you've got people who are buying investment properties. So those are three different audiences within the home buying sector. So really you've got to niche down into who it is you're wanting to speak to. And then I always say you got to show up where they are. So where are they hanging out? Where are they congregating? Be a fly on the wall. Are they in Facebook groups? Are they on forums? Are they on Twitter? Like wherever they are is where you need to be so you can listen in on what they're talking about. And then you create content based on what they're talking about. So you never have to think of ideas. Really, the content should be coming from the conversations that your ideal customer is having. So questions that they are asking, misconceptions that they have, things that they're complaining about. Those are pieces of content that you should be creating because really all you're doing is being a part of the conversation that they're already having. Nobody wakes up and says, I'm going to buy a house today, right? They've usually stalked realtor.com, they've been on or realtor.ca, or, they've spoken to a real estate agent, they're talking to family and friends, like they're already having a conversation about a particular area, a school district that they like, where they would like to live. So you need to be a part of that conversation so that when they're ready to get the mortgage, they're raising their hand because you've been educating them and you've been answering their questions. You've been addressing their complaints, things that they may not understand. You've already been addressing those things. So you're starting to build that know, like, and trust factor while they're having those conversations. So then it's natural for them to come to you when they need that mortgage because you've been there, you've been in front of them answering questions that they have. So that's the approach that should be taken when it comes to any type of content you're producing. Be a part of the conversation that they're having and answer their questions.
Yeah, I love that. Be a part of the conversation. So social is a huge part of things at the moment, probably goes without saying.
Absolutely. You've got to go where they are. So wherever, if they're at Wendy's, go to Wendy's. I mean, you've got to be where they are. That's just the bottom line. Before they can come to your party, which is your website, you've got to go where they are to build that know, like, and trust factor. Then you bring them over to your house, which is your website, where they can subscribe to your information because you've already got a lot of information there. Then they could come to you whenever they want something. Well, they're subscribed, so they're going to get all of your information. But before that, you've got to go where they are consistently and show up all the time so that they can get to know you, they can get to like you, and they can get to trust you based on the content that you're providing. And that will come if you're providing valuable content to them. And valuable content is what they want to know. And what they want to know is what they're talking about, whether that be in Facebook groups, whether that be in forums, whether that be in the comment section on different posts. So that's really what it comes down to, is building that relationship with them so that they can get to know you, they get to know the products you have, and that you can help them, cross that bridge that they're trying to get over.
some of the financial institutions that you're working with at the moment and you've worked with in the past, what have you seen that's been really sort of effective or powerful, perhaps in some of the content that you've produced for them? What have you done that's worked really well and why? I don't know if you can cite any specific bank or organization, but you can just sort of talk more broadly about what's been really effective.
It's different based on who they're targeting. So I suggest different things. Like one of our clients, I suggested that they go on TikTok heavily, just because they're trying to target the younger folks, and post videos, little snippets of videos, but they already have a good grasp on what their target audience wants to know. So I suggest that they do videos talking about what their audience is asking about,
because that's the way that their audience digest and engage in content, right?
Yes, exactly. That's how their audience consumes content. You always have to go where they are, then you bring them to where you are, right? Don't just like it doesn't make sense to bring them to where you are. They're not going to come because they don't know you and they may not even like you. So you've got to go where they are and engage with them there, build that trust, and then you bring them over to your website. Then they'll come over to your website, because whatever social media platform you're on, you're going to have a link to your website on there as well. So they typically won't come until they see you enough and they're really getting to know what type of what do you have to offer them. Then they'll come to your party. But until then, you've got to show up where they are consistently. So the most powerful content that we produce for our clients is content that we are writing that's really answering the questions that their audience is already or complaints. Complaints are good too, because when people have complaints, like one of the common ones is that some people think they have to have a minimum beacon score that is 550 or sorry 650, and some of the a lot of institutions will do minimum beacon requirements of 600 that they may not know about. So write a blog post on that, do a video on that, so that it automatically removes that objection that people have on why they can't buy a house. So really whatever they're talking about, I say go after that directly, because that is content that is going to resonate with the audience because they're talking about it. It's not something that you have to guess, and it's definitely never something that you like. Like, you may not even be your target audience, because that's what I see a lot of. People will write content based on what they like or based on what's trending, and really content should always be about your customer. What are they talking about? What do they want? And just give them that. Remove yourself from the situation. It has nothing to do with you. It's all about what they want and what they're talking about. That content will always resonate. Absolutely. The last couple of years, we've heard so much about the know your customer piece, haven't we? And RFI certainly does. I mean, that's our bread and butter, and that's what we do as as a business. We want to know exactly what customers think about their banks and why they are satisfied, dissatisfied, and those kinds of things. So it really is about listening, understanding, and then feeding something back that's really useful and is going to sort of help and absolutely make a change. I want to click onto a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur and moving from a really senior executive leadership role at a bank, and then now kind of being your own boss and running your own business, and just sort of what that experience has been like, because we've seen a lot of people do that in recent years, haven't we? Really moved from the industry into that kind of a role. And I just wondered if you'd shed a bit of light on that, and trials and tribulations along the way, and your experiences. Yeah, I was never planning to be a business owner. I didn't grow up around business owners. So for me, I was fine well, let me not say I was fine just kind of working for a company. I knew I was unfulfilled. I just didn't know what fulfillment looked like. So, and I didn't know many business owners and stuff. I didn't grow up around that. So it wasn't until I met my husband that he kind of, our dates used to be like strategy sessions. Like he comes from business owners, his side of the family. So our dates used to be just him pouring into me, you got to start your own business, like his mindset of how he wanted to run his family and all that kind of stuff. And I was just like, okay. So that kind of came later, like in my 20s. And what happened was I was working at CMHC. I started buying property really, really young. I bought my first property when I was 20, and then I bought a rental property when I was 25 or 26, and then I paid both mortgages off by the time I was 31. So and that was around the time I had met my husband. He was my boyfriend at the time, but we met around me being 31. I was just about to pay off the mortgages. And at the time when I had paid them off, a girlfriend of mine said, you should, help other people to do the same thing. So I thought, how could I do that? And she suggested that I start blogging. And so that's really what I started doing. I started my own website, and I just really started to give people advice on, how to buy property, how to get a mortgage. I was a lender as well as I bought property. So I was on both sides of the fence. So I was telling people what to do to buy a property, how to pay off mortgages faster and things like that. And my blog just kind of picked up momentum, and magazines started calling me. And I started to do some work with Gail Vaz-Oxlade after I did a Red Book magazine interview, and Gail Vaz-Oxlade wanted me to do some work with her. And I started doing quite a bit of work with her. I was on her radio show. And at the time she had like 3 television shows. I don't know if you remember, but she had Princess Till Debt Do Us Part. And was it Money Moron? She had like 3 television shows at the time.
It might have been before my time in North America, but.
Yeah. So she's huge. She was huge in the personal finance space in Toronto.
Awesome.
And so that led to companies started contacting me, wanting me to write for them. And I was still working at CMHC at the time. So my husband was like, just hire some writers. And I thought, well, that's a good idea. So really, that's what I did. I hired some writers, and that's really how the business was born. And then, the business was making way more money than CMHC was paying me. And I thought, okay, we have something here.
Yeah.
And that was when we just decided to, at that point, we decided to move to Atlanta, and then I quit my job at CMHC.
Awesome. You've made me, I'm going to fire a question at you that I didn't preface that we're going to talk about in this chat, but you've just made me think of it, because obviously we've been talking about sort of the mortgages and the property space, which is really interesting across North America. You're also a business owner. Off the top of your head, just because we have a lot of people who work in the business banking side of banks, as listeners to the podcast, what are some of the things, what's your experience been as a business owner dealing with a bank who's looking after you? Have you been satisfied, dissatisfied? How do you think that business banks can best support their small business owners, small to medium?
My biggest complaint, because we've been buying quite a few properties here, and in Toronto, I had my full-time job and I was self-employed. Here, I'm just self-employed. So I would say my biggest complaint from a customer from a bank is just the financials that are required to qualify for a mortgage is insane. It's soul wrenching every time we buy a property.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I feel like they're asking for our souls.
Right.
Just because, as a business owner, we typically, I work for my company, but I don't pay myself as much. I pay myself the bare minimum because naturally
it goes back into the company.
And I don't want to pay as much in taxes. So that's the reason why business owners typically don't pay themselves that much money, because you just got to pay more taxes.
Right.
So we rather put the money all back into the business and pay ourselves the bare minimum. So I just find like when we're buying property, it does become very difficult at times, because we always end up getting it, but it's always a hurdle. So we've come up with some different strategies now on how to buy property a lot faster. But that is probably my biggest complaint, is the soul. Every time we apply for a mortgage, I'm like, oh babe, this is just going to be, he's like, here we go again.
Do you think it can be simplified? Like, do you feel like with the right sort of, change and technology and different sort of vetting process or whatever, that there can be developments? Because I mean, America is made up of so many small business owners who I'm imagining are all having the same challenges with their own financials. I wonder if that's a space that's being looked upon. It's really interesting to hear your insight from that perspective.
Yeah, it is, because there's a lot of, because here the mortgage industry is much different here than in Canada. So you've got a lot more financial institutions here than in Canada. So here you can go to, and there's a lot of private lenders here as well. So you can go to companies that they require no docs. So there's companies that cater to people like me who are self-employed. They don't require my financials at all. They look at the asset and that's it. So if we're buying like a 6 unit or 10 unit apartment building, they look at the asset, which means they're looking at are the 10 tenants that are occupying the building paying the rent every month. They want to see lease agreements. They want to make sure that the rent can cover the mortgage payment and all the expenses associated with the apartment building. And
Yeah.
then they just want to look at me to prove to confirm that I've got the down payment to put down, that I've got reserves in case the tenants don't pay, I can still pay the mortgage.
Yeah.
That I'm okay with that. And there's companies that do that, but the interest rates are way higher than if you go to a Bank of America or an A lender, I should say. So it's a lot different. So I'm not inclined to go to them because the interest rate is so much higher, which of course into the profits when I'm buying an apartment building or a property. So that's the trade-off, right? You can go with an institution that has no docs, and then it's easy because they just want to see that you've got the money to close it and reserves, and they don't care about the financials, but the interest rate is a lot higher. We don't make as much profit on that because we're paying a higher interest rate. So it's that trade-off. But what's happening, I'm seeing now is, because I typically work with a broker, and he works with like 25 different lenders. And I was just talking to him the other day because I want to do a cash out refinance on one of our properties. And he was telling me that a lot of the A lenders are getting a little bit more flexible because they're losing business, because there's a lot of people like me who have their own business. They're not declaring as much money as when I was an employee working for a company, but they can still afford to buy a property. They can still afford to buy an apartment building and stuff like that. So they're starting to lean up on the lending criteria to accommodate people who are wanting to buy, rental properties. So I'm seeing the change. It's just happening slower. And then they're also capitalizing on the fact that the no doc lenders, they charge a higher rate. So they're charging a higher rate than they would if you provide all your financials, but it's not as high as like their hard money lenders is typically what they call them. The no docs usually call hard money lenders. So the interest rates are still a little bit lower than some of the hard money lenders, and the terms are a little bit more attractive. So
But there's competition.
Oh, there's a ton of competition here. There's a ton of competition here, because usually people that will go with the hard money lenders are usually doing like flips.
Yeah.
Money lenders are good for flips because they'll typically, if you've got some experience, they'll lend you sometimes up to 100% of the rehab. So you can get a really good deal with them, and you're not keeping the property for a long period of time. So who cares what the interest rate is? But if you're doing a buy and hold and you're wanting to keep it for a longer period, you want a favorable interest rate, especially when interest rates are going up as fast as they're going right now.
Absolutely.
So I am seeing a little bit of the shift, but that would probably be my biggest complaint, is just
it's great. I mean, it's really interesting to hear your insight from a professional perspective, but then also I guess like a personal level, as like your own personal experience, and then what you're seeing as far as trends. We've got to wrap it up soon, Shondell. I told you it would go super fast. It always does. I love these conversations and the insight. I'd love to finish a couple of things. I want to talk to you about, where people can hear about more from you. But first up, just your predictions for the future. I mean, it's been a really unstable couple of years with a whole lot of things going on around the world and in North America, and global pandemics and the like, and lots happening within our financial services industry. How do you feel about the future of the industry? I should mention as well, fintech's coming in. There's the whole sort of fintech and sort of traditional financial services provider that is like rife in the US. There's so much that goes on between those two.
Yes.
Just sort of like your sort of top predictions going forward, what you're excited about, what you think is maybe a major trend to watch out for.
Yeah, I think it's even more important now to really know your target audience, because we're in such a time where people don't want to feel like a number. They want authenticity. They want they want brands to really connect with them. And the only way you could really connect with people is by knowing them, by getting to know them consistently, because people change. But the good thing with financial institutions is you can have customers from teenager till death. So I mean, then
their family, on, intergenerational, right?
Exactly. But the key to that is consistently being a part of the conversation that they're having, because people change. You from from when I was living in Canada. I've had 2 kids. I've gotten married. I've started a business. Like my life has changed. So I would stay with the same institution if they were coming with me on my journey.
That is such a good point. They need, yeah, about changing with your customer through like their huge lifestyle changes. And you've just mentioned, 3 of the,
Exactly. Yeah. And
well,
I'm one of,
like coupling up. So, there's 2 people in a relationship, then having a family, then there's all the bits of the financials, financials that go along with that, moving, relocating, having your own business, and someone knowing you. And I was having an interesting conversation on a podcast I was on. This is actually a year or so ago now, but with a colleague, sort of friend, Jim Maroos, who hosts Banking Transformed, which I think you've actually been on before.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
But Jim was making that really good point about, I think it was a guest that we had, and he retired, and then I think his bank sent him a letter sort of a year later about something about very much that, he was still sort of employed. And he's like, they don't even know one of my biggest life events.
Yes.
And that was just something. So I think that makes a really good point about the knowing your customer and finding that journey. And I guess it's up to the industry to really focus on that as a trend, as to the point that you make.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, when I was getting married, I would have loved, even when I was dating my husband, I would have loved, to read about things like how to combine finances,
Yeah.
how to make that seamless, or how life is going to be when you have one child, and then how life is going to be when you have. See, I always tell our clients, the best content is not about your products. It's about the lives of your target audience. That's the best. Everybody needs a mortgage. The average person cannot buy a property cash. But if you're going to help me, help me learn how to, I've never lived with a man. I've never been married before getting married. So this is it's like I'm blind. You know what I mean? So if my bank would have educated me on, how to combine finances, how life is different when you have a child, I didn't know how diapers and formula was going to cost. I mean, so if they were part of that journey with me, why would I go anywhere else for any of my banking needs? I would feel like I would feel like I'm betraying them because they've been so good to me.
And they care about my changes. Okay, but here's the question. How does the bank have that information? How does your sort of bank, your financial services provider, how are they aware of, this is like a general question for the general public, how are they aware of those lifestyle changes? Like, is that up to the customer to go in to their branch or whatever and say, I've just had a family or something, or is it like massively intrusive to look at spending and realize if someone's starting to pay, I don't know, childcare fees, they've probably had a child. I don't know what it is.
There's artificial intelligence that can get into what part of the journey your customer is at, especially from financial institutions, because they usually have bank accounts. They usually have a lot of information on their customers. So
my bank account could tell my bank really my entire life, knowing that all of us, I was obviously like living in Australia, and then at 27, moved to London. You can just see that by seeing that all of a sudden all of my transactions are there, and then my bank, my savings are going in from there. They can tell when you travel, they can tell when you spend.
There's a whole bunch of retargeting things that you can do. So we're the content focus, but there's a lot of things you can do within Google. If you're doing ads, things like that, you could retarget people. You can show ads to specific types of people. So you can get really targeted when you're doing paid ads. So you can literally target, 35 to 45-year-old or 25 to 35-year-old first-time mothers who live in a particular area. Like, you can really target. There's a lot of things that you can do to target your specific demographic and get your content in front of them. And then you're going to write content or produce videos or produce content that is in line with exactly who you're targeting. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to really target exactly who it is you're going after. And there's a lot of artificial intelligence. There's so much stuff that you can do to get right into your ideal customer space and continue to do that. And all of this stuff is done continuously, and you get better over time. Because if you've never done any type of targeting or retargeting or high level advertising, you have to test. You got to do a lot of testing to see what works. It's not something that you kind of just start today and it works tomorrow. No, like it takes time to get to know your audience, to get to know what they like, what they don't like, but it's something that it's a long game. It's something that is continuously done. And then you start to perfect your system and you keep on getting to know your audience and you keep providing them with useful content. And then it just comes back to you.
Yeah.
But it always has to be tested. You always have to test the content that you're putting out to make sure that it's resonating with your audience and make tweaks here and there until you perfect a system that is just bringing in leads after leads because you're just dishing out value for your ideal customer.
I love it. I mean, you are the person to know in this space. On that point, how do people get in touch with you and see a little bit more about what you do, perhaps look into it themselves before reaching out?
Yeah, on my website, it's Varci Media, VARCI media.com. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I post a lot of my ideal customers on LinkedIn, so I hang out there all the time.
I'm always on LinkedIn.
Yeah, so I mean, I post a ton of stuff. I post useful writing tips, marketing tips, motivational stuff. Like I post a bunch of stuff on there. I got to get better with the videos. I just haven't had time to record them, but I'll use this.
This one will go up.
I will. Yeah, I'll use this. So I try to do a lot of podcasts because our social media team is always like, Shondell, you got to do more video. You got to do more video. So I like the podcast because then I can break it up
and then see someone face to face and
absolutely
really get into it.
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So my handle is Shondell. My handle is Shondell Varcianna everywhere, but LinkedIn is where I'm most active. So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. Listen, thanks for your time. We went over. I knew we would.
Love talking.
Have a bit of a cap on it at some point. Otherwise, we probably could talk for hours. But it's been really useful. Very broad conversation, in fact, about content, knowing your customer, how to target the right people, how to know who the right people are in the first place. And also thanks for your insight on the market across North America, which is very diverse and there's obviously a lot going on, but really useful information for our listeners. And thanks for your time, and I'll see you on LinkedIn. And good luck with everything with the business, and you're very inspirational, and thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast. I appreciate it.
Me too. Bye.
Bye.